Welcome to Bursting Through, the storytelling movement where love, compassion, and empathy take center stage. I'm Steve Peterson. Our conversation will shine a light on real stories of allyship, the moments where people choose connection over division, courage over silence, and love over fear. Today's guest is Joslynn Bigelow. Joslynn is the founder of Say How Consulting, a disability advocate, and a leader in adaptive sports. For over a decade, she has worked in the intersection of disability inclusion, education, behavior analysis, and athletics, helping organizations and communities move from we can't to here's how. Through her work with Say How Consulting, Joslynn designs disability inclusion systems, leads inclusive sports programs, and provides training and mentorship that center on readiness, access, and dignity of risk. Whether it's building inclusive teams, coaching on the soccer field, or guiding organizations through meaningful change, Joslynn brings a powerful mix of advocacy and heart to everything she does. Welcome, Joslynn, and thanks for taking time to talk.
Thank you for having me, Steve. It's a privilege to be here.
Oh my God, I'm so excited for this conversation. So let's dive right in. Um, your work with adaptive sports is very inspiring. How did you first find your way into this space?
Finding your way into a space that you don't necessarily identify with from the get-go is definitely a unique journey and one that comes with a lot of responsibility. I was a child when I started volunteering in adaptive sport. And of course, I've had family members with disabilities and other peers in my community growing up with disabilities, but I really found my community and my passion in adaptive soccer. As that relationship and intersectionality between soccer and my passion for service grew and became more parallel than just crossing over, I found a platform, a place for my voice to be heard, to be a voice for others who may not have a voice or may not be heard as much as others in this community. So finding my way into adaptive sports started with volunteerism, but turned into a platform for advocacy. And soccer was just a fun way to do that. But my background extends past the pitch onto courts, into the community, into classrooms and clinics to serve disenfranchised communities with and without disabilities across the board, across the age span, and everything else that makes us unique to one another.
So, how old were you when you started volunteering? And were you a soccer kid that just found your way into this other space?
Yeah, I was 11 years old when my mom actually found the program that I started volunteering for through the club I was playing for as a kid. And I really struggled socially with my peers. So this isn't just a story of I found a community that I loved and wanted to white savior my way through the world.
Yeah.
It's I found my own community. I found a place where I didn't feel isolated, where I felt appreciated for who I was and can show up as I was. Um, it gave peace to a young girl who was not finding peace in the other opportunities she had. And the volunteer opportunity really simply was just working one on one with individuals with disabilities to access recreation programming.
Yeah.
Just
Oh,
that
so,
simple.
that's so powerful and so awesome. It's like I love that you were a kid, just a little volunteer soccer kid. Um, so you mentioned in your previous statement unheard, right? People who are unheard, and we talk a lot of bursting through about those that are unheard. So what made you realize that, and what first kind of prompted you to like give voice to someone you were working with that was unheard?
Man, I feel like there's a lot of different ways for me to answer that are all genuine and authentic.
Yeah.
As you were asking that question, it made me think about a poster in one of my classrooms growing up, and it was stand up for what is right, even if you're standing alone.
Yeah.
And I that has been a really valuable quote to me and is a part of my core identity. Um, Finding this voice in myself was the easy part. I've always been loud, outspoken, direct to a fault. And I I was being raised in this environment where giving a voice to the voiceless, serving these individuals who don't communicate in a traditional fashion was really important. As I've gotten older, as I've matured, and as I've become more educated, I realize that I'm advocating for people that do have a voice, but sometimes we need to learn their language or we need to find a way to interpret or translate from mouth to ear or alternative communication method to brains of decision makers. So I digress a little bit, but that whole voice to the voiceless, the unheard, sometimes we're just not listening, and it takes somebody like me, somebody like you, to risk social injury to really push the message, push the agenda that everybody deserves opportunity.
Yeah, and that actually really kind of flows into what I wanted to talk about with you a little bit because, allyship is at the heart of bursting through. So, in your experience, how does allyship show up in adaptive sports, and what kind of allies do athletes and teams need most?
Ally is a beautiful word. And like I said at the beginning, it's a privilege to be on this podcast and to be talking with you. I love our journey of coming to know one another, which can be a story for another time.
Right.
However, I really value the opportunity to be welcomed into the space for communities, again, that I don't necessarily identify as a part of my identity, but support and love and cherish. Disability is the most unique thing on the planet because it's the one thing that doesn't discriminate. Anybody at any time can be impacted with any level of disability. Yes, there are some disabilities that are congenital or you're born with it, and there are disabilities that you can acquire through injury, illness, or otherwise. Um, the allyship piece here is with, again, intersectionality being a big part of it, regardless of the communities you identify with. Uh, the value of being an ally or what an ally means to me is to just keep going. Just because there's hardship, just because there's a barrier in the relationships or misunderstandings, continuing to push through those things and figure out how to make things work is the foundation of true allyship, is to not give up.
Yeah, that is super powerful. Just keep going, the Joslynn motto. Um, thank you for that. So just kind of flowing into kind of where we're at today in the political and cultural climate, we see daily challenges to diversity and inclusion. um, how's that climate affecting the work you're doing in adaptive sports and building inclusive teams?
Uh, I want to make sure that I'm clear. I'm from Oregon, and I claim Portland, Oregon as my place of origin. And I'm a very proud person, a proud Portlander, proud of my environment, my community, and the space that I live in that values differences and queerness and weirdness and existing as you need to in the space. Um, I want to give a little more context because we're getting into lowercase p and uppercase p political spaces here.
That's fine. Yeah.
Um, Sometimes the best places are the messiest places where social services exist. You're going to find more of the people that need those social services. And that means accepting that people are going to need to exist differently as we navigate how to serve them better. The quote unquote cleaner places around the country and around the world may not be the most inclusive, kind, and welcoming spaces. So I just want to say that as a Portlander who values every person on our streets, in our buildings, in our homes, etc. That being said, politics and disability. Um, it is astounding to see that we are taking steps backwards in valuing the human in every citizen and non-citizen of the United States. I I thought we were bridging on the next civil rights movements for people with disabilities because they didn't really happen until the 1990s in the US. And we've seen racial justice and uh, who you love justice and all of these different pieces kind of coming back. Everybody's had their decade and it comes back, and we take micro steps, but they're steps forward to see everybody go backwards, to see everything be questioned in a way that halts and interferes with productivity is mind blowing and disheartening. And my cynical view aside, seeing people with and without disabilities questioning this new status quo that's really come to be in the last few months, if not the last few years, if not the past decade, is actually really cool. People with disabilities continue to find their voice and stand up for themselves, and recognizing that they don't just represent themselves, but a broader community of people with disabilities, regardless of how different one person can be from another. We're also seeing other disenfranchised communities, people of color, queer populations, people with differing gender identities and sexual orientation, and that kind of thing, ages also being a big piece of it. Um, we're seeing people across the board speaking up, not just for their community, but for every community that's considered other in the United States. And really like, hey, this isn't working. This isn't right. And I know that I'm being intentionally vague, but I think we have to be because I don't care who's listening. Like this message is for you that people belong here. This is a place that everybody should be welcome. Everybody should be cared for. And sometimes that looks different. Sometimes it feels a little bit uncomfortable. But what are you doing in this lifetime if you're not contributing to the quality of life of others?
Yeah, and there's that was so well said and so thoughtful and so spot on. And there's such a common thread, right, with all of these marginalized communities. And and that's it's so important. If anything can come out of this time we're living in, this crazy, um, uncomfortable, uncertain, uh, sometimes disturbing time, uh, is that perhaps we're learning how to uh, take that thread through all marginalized communities, right? And stop letting us be so separate, right? Like, first of all, who would have ever thought that here in the United States in the mid 2020s, inclusion would be a four-letter word,
Four-letter word,
you know?
you
And
know?
that said, I do think there's some power in the marginalized community standing up for one another, for seeing what's happening to each other, right? And coming together in a way that I don't think, has been happening previously. I mean, there's a lot of
Right.
respect
Right.
going on, but we're not necessarily, our marginalized communities aren't necessarily coming together previously. And so I think there's a lot of power in that. And I've been doing some research in it, and I'm just getting off topic a little bit, but it's like I was also trying to find like a statistic or some numbers about like how many United States citizens really do support or and call themselves allies to the marginalized community as a whole. And it was really interesting. There's not much great data out there. I mean, like, there's not a specific data, but there's a lot of great information. What I was able to find was it's something like in 70% of all United States citizens, adult citizens, believe that marginalized communities should be protected and valued in some way. And yet here we are.
It's interesting. I think it's clear where my views lean. And I will also give credit to anybody that is so impassioned that they're going to speak out. They're going to attempt to make decisions because they believe it's right, regardless if we agree that it's right. I think they are trying to contribute to the greater good and they may consider themselves allies,
Yeah.
depending on how we define allies. And like I said, upper and lowercase p earlier, maybe it's upper and lowercase a.
Right.
Um, so I'll give credit that I think a lot of people are trying to do good with varying definitions of good and right and allyship. Uh, it's interesting. It's interesting to think about the success or lack thereof of certain social movements in the past several decades without naming any specific one in particular. We often lose efficacy, of course, when we get angry, which is a fatal flaw of mine as well. Um, but if we had social change leaders, because there's always bigger voices that emerge that were very careful and intentional about representing the whole and not getting pigeonholed into representing really just one community of humans,
Right.
it might actually serve everybody's agenda better. There's queer communities in our people of color populations. There's people with disabilities in our youth and elder populations. Like there's those crossovers no matter what. So, how can we elevate everybody together, which is a large undertaking? It might feel like boiling the ocean, or at least attempting to. But if you're not thinking about the bigger picture, you're only going to go so far. You're only going to have so much effect.
Yeah. It's it's really interesting that our current climate has really uncovered a lot of things, and I think that you um, spoke quite eloquently to that. That it's like I know that my eyes have been opened too, along I think something similar to what you said, learning how um, segregated our marginalized communities have been,
Yeah.
you know, and which it kind of ties into in a conversation for another show how we met. Uh,
Right.
it's is trying to expand that definition of communities being in each other's marginalized communities being in each other's spaces. So, um, and again, a conversation for another day. But that's so important for us to to find the nuggets of um, I don't want to go so far as to say it's like, well, hope or be, uh, insensitive to the current situation, but it's like, but we have to find these things that are going to make us stronger as we
Right.
move through this. And, you said something really interesting too about fight. And one of the things that I know I've experienced a lot over this last decade is, making a conscious choice to choose love over fear every
Mm.
moment of every day and every day. And it's a super hard choice because
Ah,
fear, all this fight comes from fear. When we fight, that's a fear response. When we
right.
love,
Right.
we talk, we work through it. And, there's just so much default to the fight right now, to the fear response. And
Right.
it's, uh, it's important for us to find the common threads and the nuggets that will make us more powerful and do make us.
You know, I think that's a good message for leaders, advocates, people engaging with your podcast are probably the best humans, right? They're the ones that recognize allyship, find power and meaning in that word, and therefore want to know how can I do more. In the adaptive sports world, one of the things that I've considered a role of mine is to empower the people that I serve to be better humans. Um, yes, they are getting opportunities they deserve, and I want to bring the world to them. But as kind of a social, not repercussion, but the cyclical nature of existing, they need to go out and be better humans to the community at large. And of course, when they're in our niche community, say our national adaptive soccer camp that we run, having people of all different kinds of abilities, competition levels, ages, etc., everyone is expected to be accepting and respectful in that space. And sometimes we push that a little bit further and contrive crossover. We schedule meals together. So even if we're not interacting directly, we're coexisting. We overlap in trainings to experience how others exist on the pitch. One of the best pieces of feedback I got from a player this past year was this is the first place that I've been where no one's staring at me because we're all a little bit weird.
Oh, I love that.
Um, and it made me think, okay, how can you take that back into your community and create a space where others feel safe and valued just for existing instead of being this odd one out? How can you promote that inclusion and sense of belonging when you go back? Because the only thing you can control is yourself. So, how can you influence positive change for you and others?
Right. Those are beautiful questions to live in.
Sorry,
Um,
big picture.
no, beautiful, beautiful question. So I kind of aligned with that. So for people ready to step up as active allies for disabled and other abled athletes, what are three meaningful actions they can take?
Ooh, three meaningful actions. If you are a leader, if you are creating a space for others, or if you are a part of what should be an inclusive and accessible space, be critical. That's action one. Be critical of who you have the bandwidth to serve and be transparent within being critical, evaluate, and then do something about it. So let's go for a second action being transparent. If you can, then do. If you are limited to under 18s, but you have the means to support more than just youth, then open it up to all ages. If you are able to welcome people with disabilities, is this a space where you can have a able and disabled combination of humans, not just as participants, but maybe as staff or volunteers as well? But also being transparent in a way that's dignified and respectful when you're not able or ready. We, as Bursting Through, are founded to namely serve LGBTQ plus communities. We are working to expand our viewership and representation. However, bear with us as we find our voice in that. That transparency is everything. And the third action is, I have to pick because there's so many different ways, but I'm gonna go with my cliche, say how. So often in life, we hear no when I think the world, the community, society, whoever, whatever means not yet because we haven't figured out the how. I say this in every conversation I have about my for profit. Say How Consulting is our taglines don't say no, say how. It's how can we acquire the resources or the staffing, adjust our ways of thinking, the paperwork of our nonprofit to be more inclusive, our marketing to represent all of our participants and the participants we've yet to have, so on and so forth. So that Say How piece is really about creative problem solving. Find a way to make it work.
Perfect. Perfect. And we're going to kind of end the conversation on that note. And I thank you so much for being, part of this conversation and being, so transparent and so passionate and so lovely as you always are. And um, you have given me so much to think about, and I believe have given the entire, audience here a lot to think about. And I'm going to be processing for a long time, and I'm sure they are too. Um, so with that, thank you, Joslynn, and thank you for listening. You've been listening to Bursting Through. If this conversation moved you, share it, because our conversations are just the beginning. What really matters is how our actions create change. And if you're ready to take action, join the movement at burstingthrough.us. Remember, allyship is not a moment, it's a movement. Together, we are bursting through.